Welcome to the Revolution Church podcast.
Hello, hello. Make sure that this thing is on and you could hear me. As long as it works. All right. You could hear me, you could see me. That is all that matters. So welcome. The viewer stuff is going like up and down, and so I'm thinking it's people being like, "Oh, it's time for church," and they sign on and they see it's not Jay, and like, "Yep, I'm out. See ya." But it's okay. I understand. No harm, no foul. But I think we have a fun talk today. Um, it's a little weird, but that's like my thing, right? How's everyone doing today? Happy Sunday. But can Sundays truly be happy if we have work starting up tomorrow? No, right? Doesn't even feel like a weekend day. It's the worst. Hey, John. I'm excited that you're pumped. Thank you. I'm excited to talk. This one's gonna be a fun one. It's has to do with these guys on my shirt. Oh, I would be a horrible weatherman. There we go. Not Simon and Garfunkel, who I do love, but see, we have Jason and Michael Myers. Oh my God, I would be a horrible weatherman. You know how they're always like pointing to stuff, but it's like backwards. So this is from a podcast that I love where they just go through every movie and each episode is probably like 3 times longer than the movie is, and so it's great. So that inspired my talk today. So Steve, what up? How's it going? How are you? Happy to see you. Trying to think if I've watched any musicals recently, but I have not. I don't really watch that many musicals except for the ones that we talk about. So I don't have anything new to contribute, but I'm always down to talk greatest hits. How is everybody? I do you know I haven't seen that or the remake, but I need to. Black Christmas. Zoe said Black Christmas because I was talking about horror movies. And yeah, I need to see that. Especially because my brand of horror that I like is slasher movies, especially old school slasher movies, and so Black Christmas falls into that. I watched Halloween and I watched Scream while writing the talk, so it's a weird one, but I think it makes sense. I think you guys will be like, "Oh, that makes very much sense." Yeah, yep. It's that's something. I mean, I'll get into it in my talk that like Halloween's not the first slasher, but it's seen as the one that like put everything that works, like put it together. Whereas other ones were like hit and miss. But as much as I love Halloween, there's a band of horror fans out there that think that Texas Chainsaw should get more recognition than it did because John Carpenter, it's not like he was breaking away from these film school nerds and doing his own thing because he was in film school like himself. Like, so he's, to them, he's just one of those like manufactured people, whereas Texas Chainsaw was just a group of like freaks making a really scary movie. So, and there's a sequel. There's a sequel coming out in February to Texas Chainsaw on Netflix. It's gonna be kind of like Halloween 2018, which I love. Halloween Kills did not love, but I'll have to revisit it. People tuning in, if you're like, why are they talking about horror movies? Just you wait. Just you wait. Sorry if I sound a little congested. Might not help my Long Island accent. It might amplify it, but hey, what are you gonna do? What are you going to do? But anyone that likes horror movies and likes podcasts, I recommend with Gorley and Rust. So they have now they're just doing like a bunch of franchises, but they had the first season was In Voorhees We Trust with Gorley and Rust, and then In Myers We Trust, and I think in Kruger. I like the strong silent types when it comes to my horror people. I don't like Freddy Krueger. I don't like Chucky, the mouthy ones. The only talkative killer I could stand is Ghostface, I guess. All right, so we'll give it a few more minutes and then we'll kick this off and talk about Christianity and horror movies and how they walk parallel lines to each other. I think you'll like it. I think you'll like the talk because it's not like my faith is like Michael Myers or anything like that. Oh, you see my kitty cat? That's Nico. That's Nico in the corner. He's funny if you ever see him face on like and post on Instagram and stuff like that. He looks like Marty Feldman like cuz he has a film over his eyes and so like that third eyelid that they have doesn't always close all the way so it looks like his eyes are pointing in different directions. So he looks like Steve Buscemi or Marty Feldman. So he's cute. He's cute now because he's not annoying me. Otherwise, drives me crazy. Horror movies are kind of like cartoons in the sense that they're a perfect vehicle to get out satire or thoughts that don't work in normal settings. I just watched this movie called The Hunt. I'll recommend that to everybody. It's a very funny movie. It's like a horror action comedy. It's a political satire in which like the like ultra elite left hunt like a bunch of deplorables, hence like in the same vein of Most Dangerous Game or Surviving the Game, but it's got like a twist because it's poking fun of everybody. It's very like no one's safe in it, and it's very telling of it's like true, like it's hyper exaggerated, but you're like, man, this is spot on. So my cats just ate, so they shouldn't bug us. My normally my wife kind of is the cat wrangler when I'm giving talks, whenever I have to give talks, and then but she's not here right now, so every man for himself. Yes, it is. It might be on Hulu or HBO Max, depending on where you are. It's very violent, just so you know, but it's so over the top that it's not. It's like that laughable violence because it's just so intense. It's not like hyper realistic, but yeah, it is. It's a critique on cancel culture and self righteousness and conspiracies and like chicken and the egg syndrome. Like, did this conspiracy happen because it was there, or did the thought of the conspiracy create the conspiracy? And so, yeah, so he might be back, or he might go sleep on the couch, my cat. So, but The Hunt, yes, I recommend required viewing for today's. No, just joking. All right, so we waited about 10 minutes. So I guess we could dive right into this bad boy. So the talk today is basically like so we'll get into it a little bit, but the I don't know if anybody here has like their go-to behaviors or things that they watch or listen to when they're depressed or in a funk or anxious. For me, when I'm depressed or stressed, aka all the time, um, I find that like I love horror movies. I love slasher movies from 70s and 80s when I'm depressed because they are like just a perfect like depressive watch. Like if you don't want to pay attention to story, you need some sort of background stuff going on. Um and there's that weird like catharsis that happens with like horror movies, but then you could still just be on your phone or whatever you want to do because you look at the screen, you're like, wait, who is this person again? Oh, it doesn't matter. They're gonna die in like 2 seconds anyways. It doesn't matter. So that's like my go-to when I'm really in it. And when I get into depressive states, I also get pretty obsessive about stuff. Hence, like I like binge watch Halloween, Friday 13th. I listen to the podcast, two seasons, one for Friday 13th, one for Halloween. Um, so that's kind of what got this ball in my head rolling. And just like a lot of the birth of a lot of my talks is I have all these ideas just scattered, but I could see like the faintest thin line that goes um close unused application. Sorry, I was just gonna pop up. I think it's fine. All right. So I get the thinnest of lines that go through all these thoughts that I have that kind of tell me like no, they all are linked somehow, and so I just throw them all out on paper, and then I just find that link and go through them. And so that's what happened to get us this talk today. Which, oh, see, look, I got my little Jason Voorhees cat and RoboCop making a an appearance. So, um, so I can't say that I am having or ever did have a crisis of faith. I don't mean for that to sound like super like self-righteous or anything like that, but as Jay has talked about, like that being haunted, right? By being haunted by God. Um I feel that for everything. So it's like no matter like I've gotten in some real low points in my life in terms of stuff that I've experienced and had to wade like just wade through and everything. Um, but it doesn't ever seem to rock my faith too much because I'm just like too in it. Like I've just been it's been my whole life and I just am too like certain of certain aspects of it that I can't ever say it's a crisis of faith because as much as I'll want to sometimes just like screw this, I'm out. Like I'm a atheist, I'm an agnostic. Like in me, I just can't because I just in a topic of something that we can't actually ever know. I feel like I know too much to walk away from it. Um, but for the I don't know, maybe close to 20 years, I have been in a almost perpetual state of deconstruction and and that's something that Jay talks about a lot. That people will say talk about deconstruction, but they will really kind of mean destruction, or their deconstruction is just the church sucks and um, church sucks and I hate it. They're all full of hypocrites, and but like life is full of hypocrites. That's not just part of the church. So there is a difference between reconstruction, deconstruction, and destruction. And so, an example of this that sticks out to me is so I do um, graphic design and I work in an engineering firm in their marketing department. And we did this job, I don't know, close to 15 years ago on one of the bridges that goes over our parkways. Long Island parkways have a whole history unto themselves. It's not a very good history. There's a lot of racism and stuff, but people really cling to the historical stuff of these structures. So when they need to rehab these bridges because they're deteriorating, we have everybody on Long Island being like, no, the historical aspects, you can't touch it. And it's like, well, it's going to collapse and hurt people. So what they do is they literally deconstructed it stone by stone and they numbered the stone and made a corresponding grid. Like this stone goes there, this stone goes there, this, and they dismantled it stone by stone without breaking them. Then they rehab and reconstructed everything so that it was stronger and won't fall and it will last. And then they put these stones back where they belong. And blammo, you have a stronger bridge that will last longer, but you still preserved the important stuff of it because of the deconstruction of it. Now you do that versus the Tappan Zee Bridge in upstate New York, in which the bridge was so bad and so dangerous that they just built a bridge next to it and they just blew up the other bridge. They implode it and it falls into the Hudson, destroyed, scrapped. That's it. There's no reconstructing it. They just built something new and just destroyed it. So that's like the difference between deconstructing something and just destroying it. And so in these thoughts of deconstruction, I started to it started to occur to me that everything that we know about the Bible and faith and Jesus and Paul are taught to us from the church. But the problem is, if the church has it wrong or lost their way, then that's what we're getting taught. You know, we're getting we're getting taught all the things that got lost in translation along the way. We're missing those also. So in that same vein of horror movies, like the call is coming from inside the house, right? So we're being taught all this stuff, but we're just being taught the broken version of it. And so as I said that I when I'm depressed, I have my go-to things, and that's my horror movies. And so I was watching the Halloween franchise, and I watched the Friday the 13th franchise. And on Netflix, they have what's it? The movies that made us. And this season, they do Halloween. They do Friday the 13th. This podcast I listened to kind of broke it all down, and then I found this something that happened in the genre of horror movies, and it just struck me that this is the same path that happened with Christianity as a whole, and this is kind of where we're at now. So this is where we get to dive into some fun horror movie talk. So in 1978, Halloween comes out, right? The original Halloween, and it's it like paves the way for slasher movies. They brought up Black Christmas, and so there were horror movies and slasher movies that came out before Halloween, but Halloween kind of got everything right, and it just made something of itself that those other movies couldn't do. Um, and the agenda for the movie was very simple. They wanted it to be in the vein of old like radio broadcasts in which you were just given like the bare minimum of explanation of what's going on, and then your mind was filling in all the blanks. That's where we get the same premise in Psycho, the shower scene. If you talk to people that have saw it in theaters when it first came out, they could swear up and down that they saw the bright, vivid red blood and how shocking it was. But the movie was never colorized. It was never shot in color. You never see the knife going in. All these things that your mind is filling in the gaps. And so that's what happens with Halloween. They wanted it to be all atmosphere and nuance, and then leave everything on the viewer to fill in all the gaps. And that's why there's hardly any blood in it. There's no gore. There's no anything. It's just one of the documentaries say how they bring your attention to the right, and then the attack comes from the left. And it's, if you've seen the movie, you'll recognize that with the camera movements, and there's some really hard, like scary stuff, but there's no gore, no violence, or anything. So years later, maybe I want to say 2 years later, Friday the 13th comes out. And it was created with one goal, and that was to rip off Halloween. Because Halloween did so well that they wanted a piece of that. And so they were inspired by it, but they also wanted to cash in on this. And so they studied it, and they came up with a formula. And they're like, oh, okay, this is easy. I watched Halloween a bunch. I know you just isolate the teens, pick them off one by one, and you punish them for having drugs and being naked and having sex. And that's why Friday the 13th is just basically, it was written as just like a series of deaths that happen, and then they're in editing like, we'll figure out a story to go. The story doesn't matter. It's just about killing them, and that's all we have to do. That's what Halloween did. But they said, what did Halloween not have that we will have? And that is blood, and that is gore. And so they make this super violent, bloody movie with gore that was not in the in Halloween, and that was their selling point. And then it becomes super successful, and it um, inspires all these sequels, right? And all these other horror movies that are inspired by Friday the 13th now. So, Halloween 2 is being made because there's such a demand for a sequel. People want to know what happens with Laurie, what happens with Michael Myers. And so they start making Halloween 2, and they make it in the same vein as Halloween 1. And they're just going off of all the principles that they had in the first movie. We'll leave it up to the people's imagination. It won't be that gory. And then they're looking at the dailies, and they're like, no, 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 this is not right. What the trend in horror movies now is gore and violence. We need to up this to meet that. We need to become like Friday the 13th if people we want people to see this movie. And so they do rewrites and reshoots, and they add all this blood and gore and all these gnarly kills in it. But the the movie and the franchise as a whole suffer from this because that's the way that it progresses from there on, getting worse and worse and worse and worse. And so the where that comes in is that someone looked at Halloween's the movie, and they came up with all these projections in it, like, okay, only the chaste girls survive, anybody doing drugs and they're punished for it. um but when you talk to, like, when you read an interview with John Carpenter, he was like, no, that wasn't the thought of it. We just knew that these kids would never fall victim if they unless they were distracted. So when you're a kid, when you're a teenager, what distracts you? Weed distracts you, sex distracts you, drinking distracts you. And so the only reason Lori survives is because she's vigilant. But it's not because she's like, no, I don't do that stuff. It's because she's a responsible babysitter, and so she can't get too high. She smokes a little bit in the car, but she can't get too high. She can't get drunk. She doesn't have boys over because she's just babysitting and doing her job. But the Friday the 13th franchise totally misconstrued that, and they projected all these things onto it. And you might be asking, like, I don't follow the connection, but what occurred to me is that Friday the 13th was inspired by Halloween. Then using its misconceptions of Halloween becomes massive. So much so that it then affects the original thing that inspired it, and then derails that into something that it's not. And so that's how I look at Christianity as a whole. We were given something through Jesus, through Paul, and everything that was so pure and simple and great, but then people start to misconstrue it, and Christianity kept, like, gaining momentum and getting bigger, and then all of a sudden outside forces got involved, such as like a conservative mindset and everything, and it bastardized the message so much that Christianity, which was pure Halloween 1978, now becomes this totally different thing that it was never intended to be, all because it got modeled after um the wrong inspirations. I don't Does this make sense to anybody but me? I don't know. It's like it's so clear in my mind, but I know I'm probably not explaining it that well. But just basically what it inspired in turn inspired it incorrectly, and then it just all went off the rails. But now what is horror movies now? Horror movies are all gore and blood and gratuitous nudity, torture, and but it's all stemming from this holy grail of horror that had none of that in it, but it allowed itself to get corrupted by its creation, right? And that's sort of what happened with the church. Um, so, and so that makes me wonder now, like, so in my deconstruction mindset, when I came to this realization, I'm like, well, what can I trust now? Because everything that I learned were from the people that learned it from the people that learned it from the people. And so by the time we're learning it, it's already been so derailed off the rails that it's just getting modeled after Friday the 13th. And then that's spinning off into Scream, and it's getting modeled after Scream. So, like, what are we getting by the time we're learning in church? Like, I don't think the church is lying. I don't think it's lying to you. I don't think that on the level that we engage with it, I don't think there's ulterior motives or anything like that. I think these pastors and priests and everything, they're sincere in what they believe, except what they learned was already derailed before they learned it, and so it's just a vicious cycle. But that's where deconstruction comes into play, and because to me, deconstruction allows for more engagement, right? We could dive in more, and we stand a chance, like more of a chance, to be changed by what we're learning, rather than if we don't deconstruct it, if we just accept it for face value, which seems to be the way church and Christianity kind of want us to be, right? They want us to just, this is what the church says, this is what the pastor says. You don't need to think about anything. We did the thinking for you, and this is the answer. And so if you really dive in, then you'll get more of an understanding. You're actually engaged more with it, even though the term deconstruction makes you feel like you're doing something bad or you're backsliding or whatever stupid words they use. But it's actually you're diving in more. And so because that's what happens a lot, is we'll learn something about ourselves, or we'll be in church and we'll learn from a good talk, a good sermon. We're like, wow, and we might feel moved by it, and it might make us think. But if we don't engage with it anymore, and then we just get into the parking lot and leave, or we log off the computer and go about our day, it doesn't matter if it moved us in the moment, because nothing's coming from it. And so we have to put action to this change and to this movement and clarity that we've had. And so I for a while now, I've been going to therapy to help just straighten my mind out a little bit. As you guys can probably tell, besides any honesty that I engage with you, just the way my mind works, you could see that it's scattered and all over the place. Normally, because I am so kind of sadly well versed in depression, I know when I'm starting to look into the abyss. I see certain telltale signs, like my obsessive thinking of things and hyper focus into something, whether it's Bruce Springsteen, who apparently, according to Spotify, I was in the 0.05% of listeners, like, so, or if it's horror movies, in which I just devour everything that I could find. I get very obsessive with things. And my therapist was saying how this is like anxious thinking. That's why when I go to bed, I'm starting to think like, oh, I don't have lunch for tomorrow. Okay, so if I go to the deli, then I could actually take this road and then this road, and there's only like I'm planning out my lunch like before I even go to bed, like and how I'm gonna get there and what I'm gonna order. It comes from anxiety and trying to find control in things. And one of the obsessive things that I was doing was it wasn't out of paranoia. It was just out of like rhetoric. Every time I would get up to go to the bathroom, which as I'm getting older, I'm very close to 40. It's happening more and more that I have to get up and go to the bathroom when I'm trying to go to sleep. And every time I would have to check all the doors to make sure they're locked. And then if it was a particularly anxious day, I would have a thing of, oh, what if when I checked the door to see if it was locked, I accidentally unlocked it by wiggling the handle or pressing the lever, and just got really bad. And the reason that I'm bringing this up is because when my therapist explained to me that it was like this anxious thinking, and that the only way around it is to not do it, to just like trust in for this example, just trust that when you lock the door, that it is locked. Like you know you locked it, and so you don't have to keep checking it. And so if I was to just come home that day and be like, "Hey, babe, I learned something at therapy that I have anxious thoughts, and that's why I obsessively lock the doors." But then if I continue to do that, I didn't really learn anything. It didn't change me. I didn't do anything. I have to put action to that, and it's not always easy. It's when I go um, to the bathroom at night, I have to tell myself like, "No, you know you lock the doors. You know like I have to actively become this change." And so that's what happens with lessons that we learn in the Bible or through a particularly great thought. You know, when Paul talks about love and grace, and Jesus talks about turning the other cheek and not being an eye for an eye, none of that stuff is our natural state of being, right? Our natural state is if someone screws us over, we're angry and bitter about it, and we kind of want something bad to happen to them. If someone disagrees with us politically or on a movie, I was just telling Jay, and I hope I don't derail this. I was once at a Christmas party, and literally the whole party stopped talking to me and my wife because we do not believe that Die Hard is a Christmas movie. It's fun to watch at Christmas, but it's not a Christmas movie. And like, and so their natural state was to just not talk to us, and then my natural state was like, well, screw them. Like, I don't even barely know these people, anyways. Like, so like our natural state is not what's taught in the Bible, because if it was, it would not have to be taught to us. But then we kind of get it on our shoulders a little bit, like, no, this is what you have to learn, and this is what we should strive to be. But it takes more than just, oh, I want to be like that. Is um like if you want to be like that, you have to actively work towards it. So it's kind of a fake it until you make it. And so you might think of that you're not being sincere or something, but that's not always the case. Just like everything else, a musical instrument, I think Plato or Aristotle or something talked about like being a good person is a practice, kind of like playing the flute. And so that's same with this stuff. If we want to be good, if we want to change, if we want to show grace to each other, like we're learning from Jay and in Revolution, we that's not just going to be enough. It's not going to be Jay's not going to say you need to show grace to people, and then all of a sudden we see someone on the other side of our political thoughts and go, "No, you get my grace." What it is going to be is, I want to like scream. I can't stand this person. How can they think that? But no, like, all right, that doesn't matter. What they believe, what they're thinking doesn't matter, because they're not the other. There is no other. Like, we have to actively do that. I promise I'll get to this. There's some good insight and some pushback that I'm glad to discuss for sure. Because again, this is just my thoughts and observations, but to touch on it, Zoe wrote, they said that they're not sure if what I'm saying is our natural state. I believe it is, just through observation of myself and others. But again, that's just my opinion, and we'll discuss it more. So as you could tell, maybe hear a little bit, I've been fighting a bit of a head cold here and there, and so um, I took cold medicine the other day, like kind of late at night, but I was still awake when it was starting to kick in, and you get that kind of loopy, like your thoughts are just all over the place, half awake, half sleep. And I was watching Home Alone 2, and I had this really funny observation, and it's to set the premise of getting Kevin to New York. Is he's chasing a man that he thinks is his dad, but it's not. And he bumps into a girl with all the boarding passes. Comic ensues where they all go and everything gets mixed together. And it's assumed that his is in there, and he gets on the plane, flies to New York. right? Funny stuff. But the observation in my cold medicine state of mind is that I'm just thinking of this ticket lady because I'm a big fan of Raymond Carver, his short stories. And something that really intrigues me about him is he always kind of tells the story after the story happened. So, for example, in what we talk about, what we talk about when we talk about love, that collection of short stories. The first one is these people stumble upon a man with all his possessions out on the front lawn, and he is selling them. But that's where that story takes place, and that's the whole story of it is interactions with this man. But we don't know why they're out there. We don't know what kind of fight maybe he got in with his wife. We don't know anything. It's just the story after the story. So I kind of start to think like that because I'm so inspired by him. So you mix in this cold medicine funk, and I'm just thinking of this ticket lady in Home Alone 2 and how she's going to be annoyed at what happened, and then she's going to go home. She'll be like, oh, this guy, this little kid bumped into me. He was a menace. And like, that's it. She has no idea that this kid is on the wrong plane. She has no idea, and she'll never know that he goes to Florida, that he's like living off his dad's credit card. He's getting chased by two bandits that he beat last Christmas, that he's befriending this crazy pigeon lady. She doesn't know anything. The only people that know the whole story would be Kevin, and when he tells his family of stuff that happened. And so I'm starting to think like I was like that's kind of like us when it comes to the Bible and Christianity. Like we only have like the scrambled boarding passes in our lives and then we just kind of like well that's we get that little fraction, this little fraction of boarding passes, and we don't know anything that came before it. We don't know anything that's coming after it. We don't know the true story behind it. And so we could just kind of extrapolate the best we can. And so the one thing that the Bible says is that the that scripture is a living thing, which I believe. Like I know that sounds like cheesy and all that stuff, but not to sound even cheesier, but most writing is like that. Music's like that. Movies are like that. And the Bible certainly is like that, in which you read the story of the prodigal son, and when you're younger, you're like, yeah, no, the son is, yeah, like I get it, I understand wanting to break away, and then you get older, and then you identify with the other son who stayed, and it's like, well, why am I getting screwed over? I've been here. And then you understand as you get older still about the dad's point of view. I had a similar thing if we're talking about movies. When you're young, you're watching An American Tail and Five O Mousekewitz, you're like, you get it. And then you're older and you watch it, you're like, if you just listened to your parents, none of this would have happened. Everybody would have been safe. Like, why didn't you just listen to your parents? Right? So our views change. And so the Bible is always living and breathing. But another thing that scripture talks about is that it's like sharp and it separates bone from marrow. Other translations might say bone from the joint, but like that's the sharpness of scripture that we're talking about. And so to me, that's sort of what we have to try to be like. We have to try to separate Halloween from Friday the 13th. Like we have to find the Halloween 1978 of it and lose all of the Friday the 13th and all the Scream and all the Hellraiser, like everything that kind of lost sight along the way. And one way that I do it is Jay, I believe last talk mentioned about the red letters and the black letters. I have a red letter translation, so you get two things like Matthew, and it's like mostly red letters. Um, I am a sucker for Jesus movies, especially if they're good. And there's one called The Chosen, and it's like a series. It's like a mini series, It's actually very good. I avoided it for a long time because I associate, truth confession, I associate Christian artistry with not being good, and I was wrong with this. But one take that they had was that maybe Matthew was either had like Asperger's or was autistic in some way, and that's why he's so meticulous, and also why he would have been chosen to be a tax collector. I thought that was interesting because Matthew above I think all other gospels is like all red letters, but red letters versus black letters. And I think a lot of times a church will focus on the red letters because that's what Jesus said. Like, how can you deny this is what Jesus said? But to me, black lettering is all that much more important because just with our lives, um, what people say only goes so far if their actions don't line up with it. So for me, if someone's ever like pointing out, well, Jesus says this, he says they're religious people are they're like snakes, they're like a brood of snakes. But then if the black letters are saying that he still met with Nicodemus and still explained to him and still comforted him, that takes precedent over what he said because that's what his action is. So if the red letters and black letters don't ever match up, the actions speak more than the red letters. And that's why with, you know, even though Paul doesn't get red letters, but the he gets his letters read. Oh, hi oh. No, but Paul doesn't get red letters, but like in Galatians, he's talking about there like no Jew nor Gentile, no division, no anything, right? That's he's saying. And then but what we get when it goes through the Friday the 13th filter is there's denominations and then there's subsects of denominations and um there's sheeps and goats and everything like that. And so that's what we get. The red letters say how God loves us unconditionally, but then God loves us unconditionally as long as we meet certain conditions for it. Like so that stuff doesn't match up. And so before I wrap this up, I will share with you some of my current deconstructions that I'm wrestling with. And again, I do this. I'm never trying to do any sort of like shock value or anything. This is like generally what I am trying to consider. And my biggest thing, and Jay touched on it last week a little bit, is like what is sin? Jay said it's living the lack, right? That's like what we use to fill in the lack of God. And so for me, that makes more sense because like what is sin? This is what I don't get because again, the red letters and black letters are not really lining up for me because like was Jesus sinless? And I'm not trying to provoke anything. I'm really wondering because we'll have scriptures that get taught that he was tempted in all the ways that we were tempted, which it sounds good on paper. I certainly you'd have to boil down some stuff to its core essentials that he's getting tempted by something I'm tempted by in 2021. Like the things are a little bit different, but like so what is sin? Like because if it's a sin to offend somebody, clearly Jesus did that. He offended the Pharisees and religious people. He offended Rome, but he was sinless. So is offending people not a sin? But that's not what we're told. And if I was to talk to Zoe or John the way that Jesus talked to people that he didn't like, if I was like, you are a dog, you don't even deserve the scraps off my table, people would be like, dude, like, what the hell? Like, what are you doing? Like, apologize. And it would be kind of like a sinful way of speaking, but that's how Jesus spoke. But of course, the black lettering did not line up with that red lettering, so we trust the black lettering. And so if we're taught also that like if you hate somebody, that's as good as murdering them because you thought it. But then how can you get tempted with something without thinking it? Like, so how is Jesus like sinless if he had temptations and these thoughts and said these harsh words? Like, and now, don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to poke holes in it, because for me, I um I believe, as everyone knows, um in terms of like, I'm certainly not conservative in any ways, but traditional, maybe that's the thing. Like, in a more traditional sense, like, I do believe that Jesus is who he said he is, and he accomplished what he meant to accomplish. Whether there's a hell, I don't care. I don't think so, because I'm a flawed human being and I would not want anyone to suffer for all of eternity, and I should not be capable of love that God is not capable of. So I don't believe in a hell. Um Also, then you get into like 1,000 years is like a day to the Lord. And so, if we live to be 70, like, what's 70 years out of 1,000? If 1,000 years is like a day, we get like, so basically in God's eyes, if you don't learn in these 45 seconds, like, the Bible says that, God, who, like, Jesus, who knew no sin, came down and, became a man. And so that's what I'm toying with, is like, no, maybe we're misreading that. Maybe, like, at the place he was before he became human, he knew no sin, but then he came down and he lived a human life. Because, people compare him to like a blemishless sacrifice that like the Jewish people had to offer in the Old Testament. But all that is talking about would be cosmetics, right? Like, they're a pure looking animal, because to my understanding, an animal can't sin. It doesn't have a sinful nature. And all of nature it's beautiful, but it's pretty horrible, because in nature, they like, if you're hungry, you go for the weakest and you go for the children and you try to kill them. If you could kill them while they're sleeping and their back is turned, more power to you, right? That's like the way nature works. And but in that sense, if animals can't sin, then any animal would be good for atoning sacrifice, because they would all be blameless and sinless. So I think there's something there. I'm not sure. That's something I'm working with. I don't mean this in any way to belittle Jesus or what he accomplished. I just think it's beyond our understanding of it. And so that's what I'm trying to get away from, the Friday the 13th of it, and focus on the Halloween aspect of it. Um, like, because the Bible says, for all have sinned, and Jesus was born of Mary, right? So, like, so is he does not have sin, because only male blood gets, like, passes down sin? Like, it just doesn't really make sense to me. And my one of my grandfathers I was not very close with, and we would always butt heads with things of the Bible, because he was my grandfather, so he always felt that he had to know more and not listen to anything I said. And he was trying to tell me that sin was passed down through the male, and that's why he had to have a virgin mother and all this stuff. But to me, that's just Christianity's looking to logically answer the illogical. But in by doing so, then it proves that it's not a miracle and it's not faith. Because if you could prove it, it is not that, right? Can God create a rock so heavy that he himself can't lift it? If he could lift it, then it opens a whole other can of worms. So, because the Bible says faith is the substance of all things hoped for and not seen. And we learn from the black letters in the Bible that seeing does nothing. Moses, they all saw miracles in the desert. It did nothing to them, because once Moses was gone for like a few days, they made golden calves and were worshiping false gods. And when Elijah performed miracles, and then they're like, "Oh, Jezebel's out for you," and he's like, "Oh, there is no God. I hate my life," which we all could relate to. The disciples, how many miracles did they see and do, and still were like, he's not raised from the dead. Like, what are you talking about? So, so there is faith will always mean more to us than seeing things with our eyes. And so, I disagree with the church trying to make the illogical logical. So, um, And then so we'll wrap up and then we'll engage. I have to read some of these comments because some of them are looking really good. But I will say that mainly to not be scared of deconstruction in your own life. It does not have to be this intense at all. I don't claim to be better than anybody. But it does go without, like, to me it goes without saying that I've been deconstructing for like almost 20 years. So it's natural that at this stage in my life deconstruction would be this heavy, but I don't want it to scare anybody off because you could deconstruct on the smallest level. For example, if you hear something from a talk, Jay gives a great talk about grace or forgiveness or something like that, and you could deconstruct that talk and figure out like why that talk moved you, and then in deconstructing just that tidbit of why that talk moved you, you might be able to find a way to put action to that so that you can actually be changed from that talk. And it's not easy. I saw that as in the chat. It's not easy. But the red letters and the black letters do kind of um agree that this is not an easy path for us. And I think that a lot of churches and Christians try to make it an easy path, but it is not. Um, but we can deconstruct even in that way of just finding a way to put action to something that moves us. And and then in doing so, we can learn to further separate, Friday the 13th from Halloween 1978 and slice that barrow the bone from the marrow. So that is my talk today, my horror filled rant. So let's go read some of these. Let's go up to, I keep thinking of Jesus and John Wayne. So this is from John. Currently, American evangelism has been in a large part inspired by the trends and sales of Christian media and the driving forces of political pundits. Yes, thank you. Kristen in Dumez's book, Jesus and John Wayne shed so much light on this. I do agree. That's part of my Friday the 13th like thinking is that especially in America, I can't speak for Christianity as a whole, but American politics actually formed the church's stance on a lot of things rather than the church's, like, they claim that, oh, we're Christians, we believe in God, and that's where our stance comes from. But it actually is the other way around. The church is so influenced by the politics that it takes conservative standpoints rather than biblical ones. Because no place, not one person or thing or location in the Bible has anything to do with America. So, Zoe said, I'm not sure. Oh, this is when I was talking about our natural state being that, more kind of like on the, I forget how I said it, but kind of more like petty and reactive and everything. Zoe said, I'm not sure if that is our natural state. Is it our natural state or are we socialized to be that way? Are Jesus' teachings because are opposite to it? Or are we more like blank slates who need good teaching and demonstration instead of bad? Yes. Like, that is something like a chicken and the egg thing is something I am deconstructing a lot in my mind. Jesus fulfilled all these prophecies, but also being studied in the Torah and Old Testament, he would have known of these prophecies. So, did he fulfill them because he knew them, or were they written because he was going to fulfill them? John said maybe it's both, and it's very possible. I think everything in the world is a gray area, and not hardly anything is black and white. Linda said it's not easy to do, but she's trying. Yeah, it is not easy. John said art is a living thing. I'm gonna be stuck on that for weeks. It very much is. Zoe said Matthew as autistic is an amazing idea. I'm going to chase that thought down for a while. Thanks for the nugget. Yes. I do tend to stay away from Christian stuff and any even like Christian music that I like. They're usually believers in a rock band, not a Christian band, but The show is called The Chosen, and it's good. It's very good. There's some things that are a little ham-fisted, some things that are a little wonky, but overall, it's very good and refreshing. This is fab, Josh. Thanks for this. No problem. Um, we we kind of all use Jesus offending people as an excuse to be a jerk, don't we? Yes, we do. Weaponizing it, right? Zoe said, I think maybe Jesus was just a jerk sometimes. He was human, yes. Calling a Gentile woman in need a dog is racist. He was raised in his tradition, land being occupied by Romans. Maybe he had anger towards Gentiles. I could definitely see that. It would make sense. I think if we let ourselves read Jesus as a human with real human struggles, it makes more sense sometimes. And I agree. A few weeks back, I gave a talk that maybe Jesus went to India and learned some Buddhist teachings, and interactions like this make me believe that he did because, just like Zoe was saying about the blank slate, is Jesus was raised in a certain way and that comes out. And then afterwards, after the red letters come out, then the black letters of actions be like, no, like, come on, you're better than this. You learned better than this. You're meant for more than this. Not to sound like that weird Christian song. But like you're called to be bigger than this and better than this. And so that's what he then puts into action. Chris said, I stopped believing in hell when I first held my son. Yes. I knew that he could never do anything that would make me want to sometime. I don't believe God would do that. Exactly, 100%. Um, Zoe said, like Malcolm X, who was nasty about not allowing white allies to join movement, but later changed his methods. Yeah, absolutely. Steve said, this is a great new perspective. Thanks, Joshua. You made me want to watch some of these films. Ooh. So said, this is good stuff, Joshua. These are kind of convos on a Sunday morning. It's a fabulous idea. Yeah, that's what I love. This is the church. I know it's a gathering, but in theory, this is the kind of church that I look for. Like I like meat and potatoes. I want to talk philosophy. I want to be challenged. I want to kick around ideas, but also it's safe enough that I could be like, guys, I watched Home Alone 2 while tripping out a little bit on cough medicine. So let me tell you my theory. And everyone's like, I like it. Steve says, when you talk about the church, in quotation, I wonder if that doesn't make the church a monolithic entity. Ooh, when there are a lot of diversity in church, the church universal, or when you say the church, to whom exactly? So I guess, who am I referring to? Like, I don't really want to talk in any sense of absolutes when I say the church, and I know that kind of puts everything in that basket, and I don't mean for it to be like that. For me, I'm just how do I don't really know how to explain this because that's a very good point. Because when I guess for me, I'm talking more about American Christianity and how the church is has a lot of these conservative stances. For me, I grew up in a conservative church. It was Presbyterian. Then when I went to college, it was a Christian Missionary Alliance. I've been to Vineyard churches. I've been to Baptist churches. I've been to Episcopal churches. I've been, was that Johnny Cash? I've been everywhere, man. But it's just to me it's all the same. Like I don't, everybody's like, oh, our church is different, but is it is it like can I walk in shirts and a t-shirt and truly feel welcome? And some churches are like that, but then what I found with churches like that, the message is um not appealing to me because it's all right, this is going to sound arrogant, and I really, really don't mean for it to be. But as we will never understand things, right? But we gain more and more, if not understanding, but we learn different ways to look at things and dissect and deconstruct. But along our way, just like growing up, we needed, you get baby food first. Well, you get milk first, right? Then you get baby food, and then you get like macaroni and noodles that you could eat by hand, and then you get then you start to be able to get more solid foods and bigger, and then you grow up and you get meat and potatoes and Big Macs and everything. If a church is on the more inclusive side, um, and they allow everybody, they usually the message is geared more in the growing stages, right? To kind of help people feel included, and so it's like softer foods to get them more acclimated and understanding, because a lot of people, they don't have our understanding of church and the Bible. They haven't been, I went to college for it. I've been studying it like my whole life, even before college. I'm 38 now, so I have a whole lifetime of this stuff. So, if I go with to a church with my wife, like what she needs is going to be more different than what I need. And frankly, what like someone that didn't grow up in the church, what they need is going to be more important than what I need, because I have my base, I have my knowledge enough that my foundation is built on like rock and not sand, and but I had to learn all that stuff and go through all that those learning stages. So that's where I struggle. And so I get so much out of these talks and this sort of more like Christian philosophy type discussions. I forgot what I was saying, but yeah. But oh, so what am I talking about when I'm referring to the church? Is kind of maybe stereotypical church, stereotypical Christians, which I hate the word stereotype, but it encompasses a lot of the way we're taught. And yeah, that's a very good question. I don't know. It's like I know who I'm referring to and what I mean, but I can't like vocalize it too well. So yeah, and I don't mean to knock church. If someone was to explain to me like, "Oh no, I'm going to go to church." I'm like, "Do it. Like go for it." Like I'm not trying to bring them into my area of deconstruction of like, "No, don't do that. Why would you do that?" Because church does help people, and that's really what it comes down to. But also, I am someone when like, "Oh, I can't believe this happened. They were a Christian. I can't believe the pastor did that." I'm just kind of like, "Well, that's kind of what happens." When you peek behind the curtain and you see all the strings and levers and everything like that, then you kind of can't go back, right? So, sorry, that was a bit of a ramble, but yeah, once in a while, John said, once in a while, I do meet Christians who defy the stereotypes. Those individuals give me hope. Yeah, and a lot of times, uh, it's like just because like they get it, right? It's like I don't know, like they understand like the more truer nature of it, right? They see more Halloween than they do Friday the 13th, and that's what they focus on. They don't focus on saving souls or anything like that. They just focus on interactions and being in the moment and being with people with no agenda. And that's really what it comes down to. It's worth thinking about what or whom you're referring to as the church. That is something I will definitely be kicking around in my brain for sure. There certainly is no easy answer, but it's really just trying to figure out a way to vocalize who I'm thinking of, because I have a very clear picture in my head, and even when I try to explain that, it just does not come out. There's just something that's not translating out. But it's good because it makes us not lump people together where they shouldn't be. I really don't want to take shots at the church or anything like that. Sometimes I do because petty, and I need to be better at not doing that and putting action to it and making it actually stick. But this was great discussion and some great questions, some good pushback. I do like the pushback. I know people sometimes veer away from it, but it's just like that engages me now. It shows me what I have to think on and focus on. I think that's exciting to me. That's really exciting. So I hope this made sense. Um, it seems like some of it did. I know when I had it all written out, it made sense. And then as I'm talking, like, in my head, I'm just like, is this making any sense when I'm comparing, Christianity to Halloween and the path that it took to the Friday 13th and its sequels? But I hope that it made sense, and I hope when I'm editing this to post it, I don't cringe at like, what the hell was I thinking? Um, but I'm very glad to have been able to talk it out because it has been stuck in my mind for a while, and so it's felt very good to get it out and bring life to it. So thank you. Zoe, they said it made sense, so thank you. John said, I see it as a dominant for the church. I see it as the dominant establishment. You can really uh, tell the people who have bought in. Oh, sorry. So when talking about the church, John said, I see it as the dominant establishment. You can really tell the people who have bought in. I need to work at not stereotyping on this. This is a huge reason why I'm part of this collective. Very true. I agree wholeheartedly. That's great. I know that for me, I've been so hurt by Christianity and quote unquote the church, and that it's hard for me to not lump it all together and into one stereotype that I'm like, this sucks, and avoid it forever. So, but I'm very glad that this talk made sense. And next time you're watching Home Alone 2 and you see that woman drop all the boarding passes, maybe may you think of God. No, just joking. So yes, thank you very much. And so I should probably end it. Thank you for tuning in. We redid the website. So if you go to the website, which is just should be revolutionchurch.com, it makes it a lot easier to donate if you would like. It's a lot more streamlined and updated since the church has undergone some changes in location and style and name. Again, I said church when it's a gathering right now. So if you want to donate, that certainly does help. We really do appreciate it. It's kind of been said in Revolution, and it still stands. Like, we much prefer the people over the money. Like, that's not, if ever having a choice, obviously we would um choose the people, but we do need money to function. Um, yes, we take PayPal. We might try to figure out ways to do more. I'm trying to think of ways to also um, raise money in an engaging way. Like, for example, one thing I'm trying to think of is having some sort of like Patreon in which um, if you some people when they want to donate, donating is enough, and that's great. Like, that's awesome. Some people, even though it's a donation, would love something for it. So a Patreon could be kind of cool, in which there might be different tiers. I do that for some podcasts, and it makes it a bit more interactive, right? Than rather just giving money. So I have ideas, but yes, if you could give, that would be great. To my understanding, I do believe Jay will be back next week. Um, this was just one, as you know, Jay got back from vacation, and he is not like me, in which when I get back from vacation, I also pad like a day or two to unwind from my vacation. He hits the ground running, and then sometimes it just too much to catch up on and still prepare a talk. So he asked if I would give this one, and so everything is good with him. In case people were wondering or nervous, it was just taking care of things. So, but um, so said, let's pay Jay's salary. It is Christmas. Yes, toys to buy for his kiddos. But yeah, thank you. Anyone that wants to give, we really do appreciate it. So thank you very much. I will see everybody around, whether it be in social media on Instagram or in chat or comment section. So thank you guys very, very much. And we will talk soon. I hope everyone has a great day, a great Sunday. And we will talk later. Thank you for hanging out. Bye, everyone.